You're lying in bed, lights off, phone 6 inches from your face. You open your banking app, mostly out of habit, mostly out of dread, and there it is. That number you've been chasing. $20,000. For the first time in your adult life, your savings account doesn't make you wince. You stare at it longer than you'd admit. You sit up a little straighter. You start mentally rewriting your next 6 months. Better apartment, real time off, maybe a car that doesn't shake like it's possessed. Here's what nobody warned you about. The second you look stable on paper, everything around you recalibrates. Your bank suddenly floods you with premium card offers, metal finish, and spending power you definitely don't need. Your brokerage app starts pushing advanced features, leverage options, margin accounts. Your entire feed transforms into people your age buying houses, flying first class, driving cars wrapped in dealership bows. Meanwhile, the Federal Reserve's latest data shows roughly 37% of adults couldn't handle a $400 emergency just from cash or savings. They'd need to borrow, sell something, or just let it slide. So hitting 20,000 already separates you from a massive portion of the population. That's why it feels like breaking through. Here's the part that catches people off guard. For most who actually reach that milestone, their balance is lower 12 months later. Not because they're irresponsible, because the rules shift the moment you win round 1. If you treat 20,000 like the end goal, you end up trapped in this brutal cycle. Climb to 20,000, drop to 6,000 after transmission failure, claw back to 17,000, surprise root canal takes you to 4,000, repeat until you're 40. If you treat 20,000 like level 1 cleared, you can lock in a rule that you don't fall below that line again and use everything above it to quietly purchase time, leverage, and actual autonomy. My name is Sterling, and I spend way too much time analyzing what happens to money once you escape paycheck-to-paycheck mode. Everyone keeps saying, just hit 20,000, then compound interest handles the rest. That's partially accurate. The other half is what actually stings. Most people say the brutal part is reaching 20,000 exact jacks. That's phase 1. This video breaks down phase 2, why everything transforms after that number, and how to stop the system from extracting it back. Quick thing before we go deeper. I'm not a financial advisor, and this isn't personal financial advice. I'm just someone who obsesses over reports about how money and incentives actually function. You treat this as education and thought fuel, not a blueprint for your specific situation. If you're making serious financial moves, consult a professional who knows your details. Meet Cameron. Cameron graduated in 2013 at 23. That same year, his uncle passed away unexpectedly and left him $10,000. Not life-changing money, but real money. Cameron did what felt safest. Opened a savings account at a credit union, deposited the entire amount, and felt responsible. The account paid 0.06% annually, but that didn't bother him. It wasn't about growth. It was about not losing it. 10 years later, in 2023, Cameron had a conversation with a colleague about retirement accounts. And if he had not ding Fillmore other codes types ends for money in emergency fund that it could offer protectively policy fund that you can find brokerage account. Well, Cameron did what felt safest, opened a savings account at a credit union, deposited the entire amount, and felt responsible. The account paid 0.06% annually, but that didn't bother him. It wasn't about growth. It was about not losing it. 10 years later, in 2023, Cameron had a conversation with a colleague about retirement accounts. Even after accounting for inflation, Cameron's decision to feel safe had cost him approximately $16,000 in real wealth over 10 years. That realization hit him like cold water. Keep Cameron in mind. We'll come back to him. Let's address the part that cuts deepest. You finally do everything correctly. You sacrifice, you liquidate unused possessions, you pick up extra income for months, your savings crawl from $300 to $2,500 to $8,200, and then your radiator explodes, or your cat needs emergency surgery, or you get that delightful "we're adjusting your lease" email. Back down the ladder you go. If it feels like every time your balance grows, reality just reaches in and extracts it, that's not personal failure. That's standard operating procedure for most people. Right now, Americans save approximately 4 to 5% of disposable income on average. Official numbers from BEA and USAFACs put the personal saving rate around 4.5% in 2023 and 2024, roughly half what was typical in the 1960s and 70s. Translation: the entire system runs on keeping most people perpetually somewhat stressed financially. So when you fight your way to $12,000, $16,000, $20,000, it feels monumental. You check that balance and think, all right, I made it. I'm secure now. But watch what unfolds next. A sequence of major expenses hits. You tell yourself that's what the buffer is for, and you're not wrong. But you never established a floor, a line you don't cross downward. So you replace the alternator, help your sister, upgrade your laptop, take the trip you've been deferring. And you're sitting at $7,000. You didn't fail, you just treated $20,000 like a destination instead of a boundary you protect. This is where people start thinking, okay, so I'm fundamentally broken with money. You're not broken, you just never received the Phase 2 manual. So what actually shifts at $20,000? Because it's not just the number. Hitting $20,000 triggers something strange emotionally. Your brain flips from drowning to maybe I'll survive this. You go from panicking over every surprise cost to thinking frustrating but manageable. Simultaneously, the external world recalibrates how it sees you. Your bank tags you as worth pursuing. Your inbox floods with exclusive access offers. Apps start suggesting larger loans, elevated limits, personal lines of credit. On the surface, hitting $20,000 looks like victory. But here's the catch. It's also the exact moment the financial system starts working significantly harder to separate you from that cash. You notice it in subtle ways. Travel sites default to showing you upgraded hotel tiers. Your credit card pre-approvals suddenly show 5-figure limits. You tell yourself, I can finally breathe a little. Because you remember how suffocating it felt when your balance showed $287, not $20,287. Psychologically, this makes complete sense. For years, your brain operated in, please don't let anything catastrophically fail mode. You were just trying to achieve stability. Now you finally have breathing room. Obviously, you want to reward yourself. Meanwhile, the system is banking on exactly that response. Banks don't generate much revenue from someone at zero. They profit from people who appear stable but are easy to tempt into long, lucrative contracts. That's the prosperity tax nobody calls a tax. And this sits on top of a deeper structural reality. The average person is already saving just a tiny fraction of their income. So once those temptations land, there's minimal margin to absorb missteps. This would be manageable if the math automatically rescued you once you crossed $20,000. But the math operates on its own timeline. Let's examine that math, because this is where things can start working for you instead of against you. When your account balance is minimal, almost all growth comes from deposits, not from returns. If you have $2,500 invested and markets deliver 10% in a year, that's $250. Nice, but not life-changing. At $20,000, that same 10% becomes $2,000. Still not walk away from your job money, but you definitely register it. Quick calculation. If you're depositing $1,000 monthly and averaging around 8% annually, reaching $0 to $20,000 takes roughly a year and a half. That's 18 to 19 months of discipline, sacrifice, and saying no repeatedly. And that 8% is based on long-term market averages, not a guaranteed annual return. Your second $20,000 doesn't require another 18 to 19 months. It accelerates because the first pile is finally contributing. Very roughly, at that stage, your investments might be generating several thousand annually without any action from you. Same person, same income, same monthly deposit, completely different trajectory on the chart. This is where compounding transitions from concept to reality. And there's an emotional shift too. Vanguard research found that people with at least approximately $2,000 set aside showed financial well-being scores about 21% higher than similar individuals with no savings. In that same research, people who also maintained 3 to 6 months of expenses saved saw roughly another 13% improvement. Translation: once you have a solid cushion, your stress plummets significantly, and your brain finally has capacity to focus on growth instead of pure survival. Everyone discusses compounding like it's automatic magic, but there's a requirement. If you keep depleting the pile, the math never gets the chance to execute what you're depending on. If your account keeps yo-yoing back down every time it peaks, it's like planting a sapling and ripping it from the ground every spring to inspect the roots. Cameron's $10,000 sat there for 10 years earning $6 annually while inflation carved away nearly a third of its value. The math works, but only if you let it work. Some of you are thinking, Sterling, I can't even reach $2,500 without something breaking. Why should I care about $20,000 and beyond? Valid question. Here's why. The habits you develop climbing from $300 to $3,000 are identical to the habits you'll need to protect $20,000 and transform it into $60,000 or $120,000. And the world will fight you harder after you appear stable than it did when you were visibly struggling. The point of this isn't to flex a number at you, it's to demonstrate how to survive Phase 1 so Phase 2 doesn't eliminate you. Now let's address the strangest trap that emerges after people clear that first milestone. You spend months, possibly years, being the disciplined one. You meal prep, you decline trips, you resist impulse purchases, you feel vaguely boring at social events. Then you see that 20,000 and something in your self-concept transforms. I'm competent with money now, I proved it. So you relax the constraints slightly. You start upgrading incrementally. Better wardrobe, improved restaurants. You stop scrutinizing prices as intensely. You tell yourself, I'm not struggling anymore. I don't need to obsess over every purchase. You finally feel like a functional adult financially. But here's the catch. That new identity can sabotage the exact behaviors that got you here. You're not doing anything extreme. That's what makes it insidious. A subscription here, a nicer place there. You start saying, I deserve this more frequently. And honestly, you do deserve quality things. That's not the issue. The issue is your fixed costs quietly drift upward until they nearly match your income again. Suddenly your margin evaporates, and that 20,000 is doing all the work with no reinforcements. This is where people will say, Sterling, if money is still stressful after 20,000, what's the point? I thought that number was supposed to calm everything down. It does calm certain things. You're not panicking about a flat tire, Owens. You're not tracking every coffee. You're no longer one bad week from overdraft territory. But if you let lifestyle creep consume your new margin, you've basically exchanged one stress type for another. Instead of will I make rent, it becomes am I about to sabotage this chance to finally build something? Bruh. And here's the genuinely frustrating part. The rest of the system is extraordinarily willing to help you sabotage it. Once your balance looks respectable, you become someone's target demographic. Your bank suddenly rewards you with offers. A premium card with an annual fee that's only a few hundred. A personal loan you can use for that home renovation. Elevated limits that come with elevated risk. Your broker or investment platform promotes featured funds that happen to carry higher expense ratios. Fintech apps push Roundup and Invest or premium robo-advisor upgrades that skim additional fees monthly. Your feed congratulates you with advertisements, new card offers because you've earned it. All in. Travel rewards cards that pay for themselves. Buy now, pay later on furniture, electronics, everything. Your bank and the algorithms in your feed will celebrate you for building savings. But here's the reality. Most of their rewards are just mechanisms to skim pieces off your new safety net every month. Quick calculation. As of early 2025, Experian Auto Finance data shows the average new car payment in the U.S. sits around $745 monthly. Over a 5-year loan at that payment, that's nearly $45,000 exiting your accounts. And new vehicles depreciate rapidly. One analysis from Ramsey Solutions notes that a typical new car loses roughly 20% of value in the first year alone. So you're taking tens of thousands of dollars, money that could be purchasing options later, and parking it in your driveway where it's quietly evaporating. Simultaneously, as of late 2024, average credit card interest rates hover around 24 to 25%. Meaning if you let lifestyle creep push you into carrying balances, your interest rate is essentially incinerating future flexibility money. Then there are the premium funds. Simple index mutual funds that track the market can have expense ratios as low as roughly 3.05%. Data from the Investment Company Institute shows comparable actively managed equity mutual funds average around 3.65%. Quick calculation again. On a $20,000 investment, 0.05% costs about $10 annually. Around almost 30,000% costs roughly $130 annually. That difference compounds every single year just because you purchased the expert selected fund instead of the boring one. None of this feels dramatic in the moment. It's just a vehicle, just a card, just a fund, just a modest rent increase. But layer all of that on top of a savings rate that's already minimal. Sophie's and sex savage, when the radical gourd it killed down for a fire from Machatan. An immanural monocle of the dividend sapphire, but nullon anxiety. Maybe slightly less or more depending on your cost structure, you stop thinking of it as savings and start thinking of it as layers. Layer 1 is the floor. Layer 2 is growth. Layer 3 is options and enjoyment. The floor is your never descend below this again money. This is your emergency fund. Housing, food, absolute minimum bills for several months. How many months depends on your circumstances, but that 3 to 6 month range you constantly hear about has real data supporting it. That same Vanguard research found that maintaining 3 to 6 months of expenses saved on top of that initial buffer was connected to a significant stress reduction and improvement in overall financial well-being. For many people in the U.S., that lands somewhere near $15,000 to $25,000. Above that floor is your growth layer. That's the money whose job is purchasing freedom later. Investments for long-term objectives, retirement, work-optional years, potentially future housing. Above that is your options and enjoyment layer. Upgrades, trips, taking courses to shift careers, helping a friend launch a business, relocating cities, all the things that actually improve your life quality now or create additional upside later. You absolutely should enjoy some of your money once you're past that first $20,000. But here's the requirement. The enjoyment has to come from the layers above your floor, not from the floor itself. Quick calculation. Let's say your monthly bare minimum cost of living is $3,000. 3 months is $9,000. 6 months is $18,000. So maybe you establish your floor at $18,000 or $20,000. If you have $27,000 saved, that extra $7,000 to $9,000 is where both growth and enjoyment exist. Maybe you decide $5,000 goes into investments and $2,000 is for actual life quality over the next year. The rule is straightforward. You can adjust between growth and enjoyment as your priorities evolve, but you do not breach the floor unless it's a genuine emergency. And yes, Genuine emergency doesn't mean flash sale on flights or I'm tired of my current phone. I can already anticipate someone in the comments. So Sterling, am I just prohibited from touching this money? What if I need a down payment for housing or to relocate to a better city? Here's how I think about it. If using some of that floor money elevates your long-term income, reduces your fixed costs, or significantly improves your safety, then maybe that's not enjoyment. That's investment in your life infrastructure. But even then, I'd aim to reconstruct the floor immediately after. Because that's what prevents you from falling directly back into phase 1 panic. The floor is not a trophy. It's the foundation of every decision you make from this point forward. Now let's discuss another trap that appears once you finally have a meaningful amount of money. You log into your investing platform, and for the first time, the chart looks impressive. You see 5 figures, maybe high 5 figures if you've been grinding. You start thinking, all right, but how do I accelerate this? How do I get from 20,000 to 200,000 quickly? And the internet is thrilled to answer that question. Options, meme coins, leveraged ETFs, penny stocks. That person on TikTok who transformed $500 into $2 million trading momentum breakouts in 2021. Once you have real capital in play, it's tempting to start swinging for massive returns. But here's the reality. One strategic bet gone wrong can erase years of slow, disciplined progress. And here's the painful data on this. In 2024, the S&P 500 returned approximately 25%. Dalbar's investor behavior study indicates the average equity investor only saw around 16.5%, almost 9 percentage points less, primarily because they jumped in and out at incorrect times. That's just 1 year, but it aligns with the longer-term pattern. That gap isn't because people are unintelligent, it's because we're human. When you watch a $20,000 portfolio swing by thousands of dollars in a week, your emotions become deafening. Fear when it drops, greed when it spikes. And if you put your floor money into high-volatility instruments, those emotions become unbearable. So here's the rule I operate by. The floor lives in cash and extremely boring, extremely safe instruments. Floor. The growth layer primarily lives in diversified, low-cost index funds or similar straightforward strategies. The I want to experiment portion lives in a tiny slice of the options and enjoyment layer. If you want to allocate 5% of your portfolio to something speculative once you're stable, that's your decision. Just don't pretend gambling is a retirement strategy. The goal isn't to never take risk. Risk is how you generate returns. The goal is to never let one foolish risk take you back to zero. Let me illustrate all of this with 2 scenarios. 2 people, same country, similar income. We'll call them Marcus and Sophia. They both hit $20,000 in savings in their early 30s. Marcus sees $20,000 and thinks, finally, I'm not behind anymore. He upgrades his vehicle, moves into a nicer place at the top of his budget, acquires a couple premium cards for the rewards, and dips into savings periodically for trips and electronics. He intends to invest more once things stabilize, but things never really stabilize. Sometimes he's at $26,000, sometimes he's back at $9,000. His retirement account grows, but slowly. By his 40s, he's making decent income and still feels trapped saying yes at work. He has to tolerate the toxic boss, the unpaid overtime, the anxiety because that savings cushion just isn't solid. Marcus made the same mistake Cameron did, just differently. Cameron let his money die quietly. Yet, Marcus let lifestyle creep prevent momentum entirely. Sophia hits $20,000 and does something different. She decides, this is my floor. I'm not descending below this number again unless the universe throws something truly catastrophic at me. She keeps her vehicle boring. She keeps housing costs reasonable. She doesn't chase every lifestyle upgrade her colleagues do. She pushes new savings into that growth layer. Simple index funds, boring retirement accounts. As of end of 2023, Vanguard's How America Saves report shows the average retirement plan account they administer at approximately $134,000. The median is only around $35,000. In other words, many people in their 40s and 50s have significantly less saved than you might assume. Sophia decides she doesn't want to be in that median group at 55. She also uses some of her options and enjoyment layer to purchase career flexibility, paying for a certification, accepting a short income reduction to transition to a role with better trajectory, saying no to some nonsense at work because worst case, she can survive months without a paycheck on the minute, and then shattering their fauces in joy are the deuterioproxits. One 2025 survey from the Interview Guys found that 44% of employees remain in jobs they dislike because their salary feels like their primary security. Sophia doesn't want to be in that 44% permanently. By their late 40s, Marcus and Sophia can have nearly identical income on paper, but completely different levels of freedom. The account special text the blind. Marcus is stuck saying yes because dropping to zero would push him off a financial cliff. Sophia can say no because her floor and growth layers are executing their function. Some of you might be thinking, this feels like a problem for people who already have money. I'll worry about this phase 2 material when I actually get there. Here's the part I wish more people were honest about. Most people do reach something approximating $20,000 at some point in their lives. A bonus year, an inheritance, a few strong years consecutively. The question is not, will you ever touch $20,000? The question is, when you do, will you treat it like a trophy or like a foundation? And that brings us to the final upgrade, how you actually perceive money. When you're trapped in phase 1, money is about possessions. Can I afford coffee today? Can I afford the flight? Can I get the vehicle that doesn't sound like it's dying? After $20,000, the real upgrade is that money can start being about options instead. Options like taking 3 months between jobs without panicking, relocating to a different city that fits you better, working 4 days weekly instead of 5, walking away from a manager who treats you poorly. Life genuinely does get easier after that first $20,000, but here's the requirement. Whether it keeps getting easier depends significantly more on your next several choices than on the number you hit today. If phase 1 was about escaping chaos, phase 2 is about not drifting back into it just because everyone told you you're fine now. Cameron opened a Vanguard account that same week. He can't recover those 10 years, but he can make sure the next 10 look completely different. That realization didn't break him. It clarified everything. So here's the straightforward playbook. First, establish what your real floor is, how much you need to feel secure for several months. Treat that number like a boundary you don't cross downward without an extremely valid reason. Second, build a growth layer above that. Boring, low-cost investments that quietly work while you're living your life instead of staring at charts. Third, give yourself an options and enjoyment layer so you can actually enjoy your money and make bold choices without raiding your foundation. Fourth, be suspicious of anything that gets more aggressive about selling to you once your savings grow. If a product, a vehicle, or an opportunity consumes your floor or your growth layer, that's not a reward. It's just the system taxing your progress. And finally, when you do mess up, and you will, I have too, treat it like a detour, not evidence you're doomed. Reconstruct the floor, restart the strategy. Keep your focus on the options you're purchasing, not the possessions. Because the real truth about money is this. The number in your bank account matters, but the rules you establish for what happens after you hit that number matter significantly more. You don't need to become a finance expert. You just need to protect your first $20,000 like it's the foundation your future life stands on, and refuse to let the world or your own impulses turn it back into a finish line.